hoping this is going to be quite informal. Alright, so let's not go through that. So we're doing on financial statements, so the why, what and how, so there's three of us today, so you've got myself, Tripana and Rishi as well. I'm sure you've seen this enough times today with those sponsors to I'm sure you'll see them more times today. Okay, so we're actually going to rejig how we talk about this. We're going to cover the what first, the how, and then the why. So the what, we're going to show you the different options. I know we've been speaking about them here. So we're going to show native Power BI, but also sort of third-party visuals and paginated reports. How you actually go about doing it. We're going to look more at there's different ways you can do it within native Power BI. And then the why, we're just going to cover off the key reasons why you want to. So a lot of you might just get your financial stuff straight out of your ERP system. Why wouldn't you continue to do that? Why would you use a loaded platform? So I think the initial, what reason? Okay, so this is a income statement, cash flow and balance sheet within Power BI. This is a native Power BI visual that built out. So you can obviously flick between the current month, quarter to date, year to date, you can do all those kind of things. You can also see a bridge, which you've got here from forecasted or budgeted profit after tax all the way down to your actually what you achieved, and you can see some of your variances, right? So why did I hit budget, why did I miss it? You can quite quickly drill into it and see why that's happened. And you know, clicking into budget. We've also got in here balance sheet, like I mentioned, statement of financial position, and you've got your cash flows. This cash flow is using the indirect method for cash flows. And you can see at the bottom we've got the cash movement for the bank in and the bank out, and that should match between our indirect cash flows. So this is what sort of thing you can do within native Power BI to build up your visuals.
Yeah, sure. So I'll come here because I have that. Cool. So then this is an example of an app that in Power BI service. So we've got some examples of producing an income statement within Power BI. So the first one is a standard matrix. So to build this, we've done all of the rows in a separate table. So you've got your lines that you want exactly in the hierarchy in the order you want them to appear in a separate table, and that allows you to then write the DAX to say pick up the right line, pick up the right thing from our general ledger according to whatever is in this table, the metadata in this table. And we can show month to date, quarter to date, year to date, or choose a particular period. We've also got, you can actually choose a different currency. So here we're selecting a specific organisational currency unit and saying we want to see it in local currency. And then you see here, the numbers are now shown in pounds. So we're using, I mean this is actually using the calculation group to do that, because it's quite, otherwise if you use format function, it converts it to text. We've also got profit base. So profit base custom visual actually allows you can go to edit in the visual here, and then it allows you to insert rows, and you can do calculations on the lines in there already. So you can say gross profit is revenue plus cost of sales or minus, depending. We've got Info River, which we were just talking about just before. So it gives you pre-built formats for income statements, and it also gives you like this Excel style ribbon inside it, so you can actually customize it. And this is available to the users in the app, so they can actually go in and start to change all of that themselves. Zebra BI, touched on that. This is really good for variance analysis, and a lot of this stuff is actually on the free version as well. And profit base actually, a lot of stuff is free version. So really good at showing the variance analysis, and it has those there. And then we've got paginated reports. So this is a paginated report connected to the same Power BI data set, and it's just embedded, the report is embedded in here. So the idea is it responds to filters. So if you select a period, month, day, quarter, year, it responds to that. And then plus you've got the export capability. So export it to Excel, export it to PDF, and then it shows you exactly, formatted exactly how you did it. Pixel perfect reporting, so traditional standard BI. We've also then got the Excel income statement too, which I was alluding to earlier. So this is also just a thin workbook essentially connected to the same Power BI data set. And actually I'll go through now we'll go through this in a bit more detail in this next section now. So this is the Excel income statement. So essentially what we have here is these are all done through formulas connected live to data. So there's no actual data in this Excel workbook. It's connected to Power BI data set in service. It's using the cube value and cube member formulas. So cube member is a list of your dimension, your attributes. So it says pick up this particular attribute, pick up other primary income through your FS lines table. And then these are your measures, FS lines total per month. And then you've got cube value, which says give me the intersection of all of those cube member items as well as your for these measures. And then you can do exactly like you can in Excel. So it's not a pivot table grid, it's a normal grid. You can insert rows, you can format them, you can lay it out exactly how you want, using all the normal standard Excel features. We also then have filters at the top. We can say, we want to see it for particular periods, we want to look at month-to-date, quarter-to-date, year-to-date, and it will all reflect. Again, we'll go back, pass off that query to the queue, and return the data. So it's not having to do lookups. Even if you had, a billion rows in your data set, that would just work, and it would be a 20 kilobyte file that would just work straight away. What we're doing here actually is showing it as well for different currencies. So here, what I'm using is conditional formatting. So if we say local currency, and we switch it to a specific organisational unit, say UK, then we've got the format string there, and it's actually using conditional formatting to show this in pounds. So I think I'll actually show how you do it here, which is a bit neater than so here it's saying that you've got the logic there saying if you select a reporting currency global, then show it in dollars, otherwise show it in pounds if you've got UK selected, and that's then showing the currencies in there. And Trapana's going to show how to actually create this as well in the next section. Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Rishi, for the fantastic explanation. So now we will just see that how we get into this and how we build it on with the financial statements using Power BI. So just if we take a step back, we can see that what is happening in the data set, like what Rishi was mentioning about the common data set. So in that data set, how the things are related. So we have a layout table, for example, where we have all the account heads listed, property, plant, equipment, and then we have the from and to, which is having the line items from which and to which it needs to be added up, and then we have a primary key, which is like a unique field associated with each of these line items. Then here we have the ledger, so which is each of the account IDs associated with each of the measure values, each of the values associated with it, and how they are linked together. We have a linked table where it is like each of the primary key from the left and the subledger account ID from the right, and we have this linked table in between, and how the relationship is flowing from the layout table to the linked table down to the ledger table. So for example, if we take like 201 for property, which is the PK assigned to it, then 201 is assigned to the account ID 10100, and 10100 here we have 10, 15 and 5, 3 measure values, which is adding up to 30. So in the front end, what the user sees is just properties associated with 30, and this is how the relationship is flowing in the background. Now we will just look at how it looks in the physical Power BI file. So we have the financial statements, which I was just talking about. So there we have this level 2 where property, plant, equipment, we can have higher levels as well as non-current assets, etc. Then next we have the transaction table. This is how it physically looks in Power BI. So here we have the subledger account IDs, and then we have the values associated with it. You can have different organization keys as well. And then third one is the ledger mapping. So we have this linking table, which is the PK and the subledgers, which I was talking about. So this is how like Power BI looks physically, the data model. So this is the financial statement on the left and transaction on the right, and the ledger mapping in the middle, which is linking between these two. Now this is on the back-end part. Now we come to the Power BI visualization, the well-formatted income statement which Chris was showing in the previous section. So here we see that how we get on to this kind of, so this is pure native Power BI, so how we get into that. So we are using the metrics visual, which is out of the box Power BI visualization available. So for these tabular formats, and once we go there, we use these tabular formats, then we can see each of these line items are highlighted, and there are some colored figures as well showing different things. So this can be achieved using the properties pane in Power BI we have, and in the properties pane we have the option for conditional formatting. So in the conditional formatting, we have background color and foreground color, both we can use it. So here we are taking the advantage of advanced control inside the background color, and in this advanced control what we are going is we are using the hex code background. This is just a color code we are using in a metadata file that we already have. So this is completely dynamic, like whichever color you give, that will come as a background for this one. And once we do this, we can see these highlighted options available there. Apart from that, we have these measures which are coming up in this tabular report. So this is actuals, budgets, forecasts, and each of these variances which are listed here. So these are the measures which are created in the model. Next we have the actual selected period. So for the slices we are using this selected period, and slicer is again another out of the box visual which we are using here for the filters. So we can see current month, quarter to date, or year to date, and we can use this filters for viewing our data, so the data is getting changed when we are opting for different filters. Now we come to the Excel integration, what we were talking some time back. So instead of having different data sets, each of the data sets sitting in each of the Excel files, we can have a centralized Power BI data set, and each of our Excel reports can be built based on that. So the data is getting refreshed and data is getting stored in a single place. So what we have here is, as Rishi was mentioning earlier, so we can just load an Excel file called the Analyze in Excel is the option in Power BI service, and what that will do it will load the entire Power BI model here on the right hand side, and it's just a simple pivot table that all the finance users are aware of. And we can use this, we can use the normal pivot filters, columns, rows, and values here, and we can select the filters, how we interact with the normal pivot table, and the values will get changed. And the values are actually coming from the Power BI common data set. So if you see that here in the properties, we are showing that it is actually connected to the Power BI data source. So the data set is common, it's not in this one. And that pivot table can be converted into the cube value and cube member functions we can use here. So you can see here the cube value function is passing these parameters of all these filters, and then this gross profit as a measure, and it is coming up with this actual values. And as it is dynamic, it can be used for any kind of formatting or string formatting or currency which Rishi was showing. So this is very much useful, and the data is coming, and you can get your own report format, own template as we need it for the financial statements. For the next session, I will just pass it over to Chris.
Okay, so the final section is all about sort of why you want to do this, right? Because you can just get it out of your ERP system. So why do you bother to go through this? Because obviously you see it's quite a bit of effort to actually set all of this stuff up. Kind of can't cover all of the why reasons, but I think there's sort of three kind of main reasons that we want to touch upon. I mean, the first thing is that you can explore the detail, right? Power BI is capable of holding literally billions of rows of data, right? So rather than just downloading your headline numbers, you can have the detail that sits behind each of these numbers. So if you have your gross revenue, for instance, you can actually get down to your individual receipts that sit behind that gross revenue number. So you get all your product details, you can get the date the transaction happened on, you can get the VAT number, the non-VAT number. Obviously you can't just export this from your ERP normally, you need the ability to start from a high level number and then drill into the detail to get the billions of rows of data. This allows you to do things like adding in tooltips, right? So this is just one example of where you can drill into the detail. Is that over here, we can go to our income statement, we can hover over, and we're going to get a tooltip here that shows all of the country numbers that sit behind this, right? But this is just one example of ways you can use that data, that volume of data. The other big advantage is growing object level security, and security in general in Power BI is really strong as long as you pay attention to the details. So see, when it comes to finance data, security is one of the first topics that you always get yourselves into, right? They always want to know about security. So we've got 4 examples here of France, Germany, Italy, Spain. And what you can do is you can convert this into a table. You know how row level security and object works, okay? So you kind of understand how it works in principle, right? So if I want to look at what the French numbers look like, when I log in, there's a France employee, will show it. Yeah. So I'll just quickly show this. So you obviously, if you know how this works already, right, you security is controlled by roles. There are 3 different layers of security. There's the model level, the row level, and the object level that you can set within Power BI. Here we're just using row level security, so we're viewing it as the UK, just to see the UK numbers. And finally, hand over to Rishi, just to explain that.
How long is the object level? I assume an object is visual.
No, an object is a column or a table.
A column or a table. So you can either restrict the whole model, you can restrict the rows, which doesn't impact upon the integrity of your model. As soon as you start doing object level security, you can have integrity within your model missing, right? So you can hide a table, and therefore for certain users.
I've only ever done row level security.
Yeah, so object level security you have to do in Tableau Editor, essentially. Okay. So in there you can define, against the table or columns, you can say role against that. Same way you do row level security, we have to do it in Tableau Editor. The only thing to be aware of is that actually then if you go into that and there's a visual based on it, it'll break. It'll just show the commercials. So I think, to be honest, to try and mix them is quite hard. Try and keep it simple. Yeah.
There's cases, so if you have, for instance, your national insurance number within your data for your employees, right? You want your employees to be able to see the data, but the national insurance number, you don't want managers to see that, so you can hide that column of data. But you might want to be able to see the rest of the data about that employee, how long they've been with the company, all their other details, right?
Okay.
But that data you might want to allow just for HR employees.
Yeah, really good.
That makes sense.
Cool. So then we come to the kind of thing we've also covered as well, which is the kind of single source of truth. Why? And this is a real big for why Power BI, because yes, you can have all your Excel workbooks, you can have all of this, but really what we want to achieve with Power BI, at least from the data perspective, ignore individuals for the minute, is actually that everyone's working off the same version. Everyone's working off the single version of the architecture. Now, that's not the default way to work with Power BI. The default way to work with Power BI is actually to put everything like you do in Excel. Put all your data in, shape it, model it, visualize it, all within a single workbook or file. And then, this is where you end up with kind of Power BI hell in organizations where you just have hundreds of and lots of repetition. But there are different versions of this architecture where actually you can have things called data flows and shared data sets. But what they allow you to do is split those components out. So you can split out your modeling from your modeling from your data prep, from your visualization. And this is an architecture of different workspaces. So workspaces are folders in the Power BI service that allow you to combine artifacts into a single space. And what we have here is an example of a kind of how to use workspaces to achieve this kind of objective. So we have, on the first one we have is general data flow workspaces. So this is the kind of workspace that will host your data flows are your connections to your source tables and any base transformations that most people in the organisation will have access to. So your calendar table, your list of organisations, and also things like exchange rates and filings or public information. That's those. And then we have a finance domain-specific workspace, so which uses some of this data, but also uses finance transactional data. So that sits in its own workspace. So you can control access to that specifically. So the people who need access to that workspace are the finance team, who are the data modelers. So they will connect to those data flows, build their data sets, and then publish their shared data sets into this workspace as a certified shared data set. We then give, so there's the people who need access, we then give build permissions to the visualization analysts, to the analysts who do finance. And now those people don't need to worry about data. The data's there provided, and the logic's there provided for them. They can just live connect to that shared data set, and with the build permissions, they can just create their own reports. They can focus on the storytelling, they can focus on what the data's doing. You're not paying qualified accountants to spend 40 hours a day, a week in Excel, right? So then those analysts can focus on that, and then they create thin reports, and they publish it to the Power BI service. Then we have the report consumers, and the report consumers access this via an app, and it's all controlled through Azure Active Directory groups. So you put people into the right groups, when they log into the service, they'll see the apps that they can see, and everything is then controlled from that perspective. Cool. And that's it really, isn't it? I think that was the last slide. So, yeah, thank you. That was a quick whirlwind tour of financial reporting. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
Have you when you're doing, you spoke about before, millions of rows, how you go from the import mode at the aggregated level through to the detail at more likely going to be a direct query type method. Would that be the best? That's what I normally do anyways. Aggregate at the top of import mode, your high level figures, and then when you need to go down to the detail, you'll be direct query live into the data.
It's a good pattern. I mean,
you need to use aggregations, right? There's the auto ags now in preview as well, so you don't necessarily need to worry about doing aggregations yourself.
Is that against Synapse?
As with all preview, I don't know actually what's against.
And is that pro versus premium as well? Because that is starting to become more of a prominent feature now, where before, say 2 years ago, everything was just pro. All features just came along, but now premium come along. You're now having to go, well, actually, that's a premium capacity thing only. You can't use that, etc.
Yeah, I think with something of this scale, you need to use the XMLA endpoints, which are a premium feature, because it's the only real way to design your model in an efficient way. You can't really be using Power BI Desktop for stuff at this scale.
No.
But yeah, and then I think the auto ags, use them with all caution, they're still in preview, but they will become more available. But it is very useful to go down.
Do people know what auto ags? So just to go back, say, what's your name? Peter. So as Peter was saying, obviously you can have, where you've got lots and lots of data, you don't want to bring it all into your model because that will bloat your model. Your models become too big. And actually, if you're using Pro, you've got a 1 gigabyte limit on your
2 hours time lag.
2 hours time lag to refresh. But also, it'll impact performance and all the rest of it. So you want to keep your data models kind of slim and as small as you can. So actually, what you can do is when you import your data, you have your high-level data there. You have your aggregated data because most of the time in the report, you're viewing some of this, or you're not viewing individual transactions in your ledger, right? Whereas if someone wants to go from that level of detail and view the individual transactions, then they can fire off a specific query to the database in direct query mode. Now, the reason you don't want everything in direct query mode is because it's bloody slow. But because then it has to do all of those aggregations on the fly. Whereas here, if you're passing a specific query to say where the general ledger code is this, and where the data is this, and where the customer is this, then it will give you a very defined query and it'll come back at a decent speed. So you could use, it's the kind of best of both worlds. And then what Chris was referring to is auto ags, where actually they say you don't need to actually determine, because in that scenario you have to determine this column will aggregate to this column. So when someone says sum of this, it means you can take the table and here these two relate. But auto ags is where it'll actually do that behind the scenes for you when you connect to a database. I think it's just Synapse. I'm not sure.
Synapse and Snowflake.
And Snowflake. Okay. They don't chat too much about Snowflake.
No, they don't.
Shouting about Synapse. I wonder why.
Yeah. So yeah, you could do auto ag feature, and then there's also things coming like hybrid tables, where you can have a table where 90% of your table will be import mode, and say you wanted just today to be direct query, essentially.
I assume that's all premium type.
I think that's all.
Yeah, I mean,
It's definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know about the composite tables. I'm not sure if they're.
Yeah.
You can sign. I'll give my laptop for some the QR code.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
That's it.
That's brilliant.
Also, you have deals with Microsoft for premium.
Yeah, they do. I mean, so there's obviously two licensing options. There's premium per user and premium per capacity. So premium per user standard, price is $20. So if you have E5, you have the pro license already, then it's $10 on top. And then I didn't realise this as much until recently, but actually it seems like everyone in the organisation really needs to have PPU then at that point, because once you start doing stuff and pasting your data flows and your data sets on PPU, the readers also need to have it. You can't kind of just have your developers build stuff in PPU and then just have 3 people use it. It doesn't, or pro users use it. It doesn't work like that.
Can you have data flows in PPU but
data.
people connecting to them with Pro? Because this is a bit you can't.
So you can't have people connected. So PPU data flows are really good. So PPU,
You can join.
well, yeah, you can do joins, but also
Depends.
you've got things like enhanced compute engine, so you can query fold against data flows. And for me, that's the biggest thing. Query folding is the. I don't know why I don't know why it took me 5 years to come up with to introduce it to data flows, but it's it's one of those things where you've got huge amounts of data, and I really like the idea of data flows because for me, if I could choose an option to say actually in Power BI Desktop only have data flows as your only connector, because you can have this kind of architecture, everything centralized, right? And then people can connect into the data flows, and you can even then have different flavors of data flows. You can actually have data flows which are just representations of data and data lake. So you just mount it as an external data flow. And then the challenge with that is that every time you're querying a Power BI desktop, it's bringing all of the data. But now with the Power Platforms connector, you can do query folding.